Welcome to the show. I'm sitting here with Professor Yehuda Bauer. He knows everything about the Holocaust. Or?
Well, if I knew everything about the Holocaust, I wouldn't be studying it. But I am a Holocaust scholar, yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us, did you start your work with Simon Wiesenthal?
No, I knew Simon Wiesenthal. We had contact, and he visited here, and we had long talks and so on. But he did one thing, which is hunting Nazis, and I did quite another thing, which is trying to find out what happened during World War II to the Jews.
So his thing was to get the Nazis to trial.
Yes. And I was quite willing to help him if I could, but...
with the information that you had.
Yeah, but I had no... I mean, this was not my purpose.
It's because you were not involved
No, I deal with the period, not with the hunting the Nazis afterwards. That's his...
Did you help him?
I don't know. You would have had to ask him whether what I told him was any use to him. I don't really know.
I was reading the other day, when you were in Sweden, as a matter of fact, that it's one of the countries in Europe that never had anything to do with the time of between 1939 to 47. Because they just, we didn't know anything, but Sweden known as a lot of Nazis, people, a lot of Nazis in Sweden, lived in Sweden, like Heinrich Himmler.
No, he never lived in Sweden, but Swedish and other scholars have written about the relationship of Sweden to the Holocaust, so I can just repeat what they found, and also from my own research. Of course they knew, as much as people knew in the West at all, which until about the middle of 1942 was very little, because the mass murder of the Jews in Poland started in March 1942. The mass murder of the Jews in the occupied Soviet Union started almost a year earlier than that. And there was very little that was known about it in the West.
You mean Ukraine
Yeah, in the occupied
Belarus,
Soviet...
all right.
Yeah. In actual fact, the person who brought the first reliable information to London was a Swede. His name was Sven Norman. He was a Swedish businessman who was stationed in Warsaw and did export-import business between Germany, Nazi Germany, and Sweden, which was something that Swedish businessmen did.
Yeah, we know about that, yeah.
Now, he was in contact with the Polish underground. He represented a Swedish company, and the local manager was a serious member of the Polish underground. Also, he had a secretary who he found out very soon was posing as an Aryan Pole, but actually was Jewish. And through this man, not the woman, not the secretary, but through the man, he got a document which was composed by the Jewish underground in Poland at the time, and which reported for the first time in the greatest detail what the Germans were doing to the Jews in Poland.
In Poland.
Yeah. Now, he he spoke fluent Polish, of course. He arranged for a piece of luggage which had a double bottom, and he put the document in there, and he decided to smuggle it to Sweden. If he had been found, he would probably have been shot on the spot by the German. He went to Sweden actually on the 22nd of May 1942, and he managed to get it through. He was not found, and in Sweden he contacted the representatives of the Polish government in exile in London.
In London.
Yeah, there was a Sweden. They had a person in Sweden representing them, and they had a contact by a Swedish airline, neutral Sweden,
Yeah.
which was flying from Sweden to Scotland, and they flew that document to Scotland, and then by railway to London to the Polish government in exile, which at first this was unbelievable what was said in the document. So they hesitated whether they should publish it. But then the...
Who hesitated? The English?
no, the Polish government
Oh,
in exile.
okay.
Yeah? In the end, they decided that this was reliable, and they published the document. Actually, the Polish Prime Minister in exile, Sikorski.
Was he Jew?
No, a Pole. This is Polish government.
I know, but I heard
You couldn't have a Jew in the Polish government.
there's no
way.
in media the other day in the media when
Yeah.
they were talking about this thing in what happening with the new law in Poland. Do you know?
Yeah.
And then they says one of the reporters says the exile government in London, the Polish exile government in London, which one of them was a Jew, insisted that they would publish this document. This is crap.
Stupid.
Okay.
Absolutely stupid. There were two Jewish representatives in what was a kind of a parliament in London. It was a large number
Exile
of
government,
Yes.
yeah.
No member of the Polish government in exile could be a Jew. But the Polish Prime Minister published this, and then the British took it up, and it was spread all over the Western media. So from that point on, of course, everybody in the Anglo-American side who wanted to know, because it was published all over the newspapers, and of course in Sweden, who read the papers, knew about the situation in Poland. And this was due to this very unusual man, Sven Norman, who did not go back to Poland, of course.
Of course.
He stayed in Sweden, and he died, I think, in 1979 or something like that.
Yad
He was
Vashem?
80. But no, nothing to do with Yad Vashem.
No, I said, does any other Jewish institute of the Holocaust knows about this guy?
No, we didn't know. I didn't know about this until about half a year ago. I found it out through research. Sven Norman, after the war, did not want to talk about it because he was afraid that, there were 6 businessmen. He was one of them. After he went to Sweden with the document, the Germans, of course, immediately found out that it was he who had smuggled it.
And they were looking
So
for
they
him.
arrested the other 5 who spent the war years in a German prison. And after the war, they accused Sven Norman of being responsible for their being arrested. So he didn't want to get into trouble with them. So he kept quiet. He not completely. He told people here and there, but he did not publicize it in any way.
Because it's a new name. I never heard this name.
I know. I mentioned it in Sweden to
Yeah, I know.
the Swedish government people. They didn't know. How should they know? They couldn't know because it was never published in Sweden.
Does the Yad Vashem,
No,
anybody
I-
would know?
no,
No, would do something
Yes,
for him?
Yes, we now have I initiated in Yad Vashem a procedure to find out more about it, find documentation. There must be documentation in the Swedish archives, but nobody until now has tried to find out. So this is still in the future. Some student, MA student or somebody, sooner or later will go into the archives and find the documentation, because obviously the Swedish intelligence service, after this happened, found out exactly who was what and so on.
So they just covered it.
No, they didn't cover it. There was no, in 1942, to publish this was endangering Swedish neutrality. So obviously they wouldn't do that. Sweden started abandoning its pro-German policies towards the end of 1942. They didn't like the Nazis, but they were afraid because the German army could occupy Sweden in a matter of a week. The Swedish army was no match for the German forces.
It's an amazing story to know that there is another Hasid Olam, Hasid Umot HaOlam. Is that the name?
Yeah.
A person like that should have.
Wallenberg. Yeah, but Wallenberg is a different story.
No, but this title of it,
The title is, there are 26,000 people who are recognized as what is in English known as righteous.
the righteous, but
Right.
like Schindler, Oscar Schindler,
that's
and
over 26,000.
Raoul Wallenberg.
Yeah.
So this guy could get into that.
So sooner or later, he will most probably get the recognition. We don't even know yet whether there are any family members who are connected with him who live today in Sweden. We know that he did not have children. He had an adopted daughter. We don't know what happened to her. People are still trying to find out.
Well, we can help you do that in Sweden. I would like to ask you something that is troubling a lot of people. The new law of Poland. What's the deal with this?
There is a radically nationalist Polish government,
Now,
yes, who want to follow an agenda of a basically anti-liberal policy. And they are trying to revise the history of World War II. Now, this is not done openly, of course. The legal position is that they passed the law. It's been passed. It's been accepted by
Just
the
a week,
two houses of parliament
yeah.
and signed by the president, which threatens with jail and a heavy financial fine anyone who argues that the Polish people or the Polish nation was in any way connected
to-
with the crimes of the Nazis in Poland. Now, nobody argues that the Polish nation was responsible, because there was no Polish nation under German occupation. There was an underground, and the underground was overwhelmingly anti-Semitic. There were pro-Jewish elements in the underground, but they were a small minority. They managed to rescue some Jews. But the large majority of the underground, both the civilian and the military underground, were very much against the Jews. And
even the underground.
not even, the underground.
All right.
There was even a part of the underground, they joined the major underground military movement in 1943. They were called the NSZ, which was basically a fascist Polish military underground, which collaborated with the Germans for a while, Afterwards, no. And they murdered Jews. And they joined the underground in 1943. And the present Polish Prime Minister, a few days ago, laid a wreath of flowers in memory of the NSZ.
Yeah,
Yeah?
we saw that.
So you have a... now, I'm not saying that the government is anti-Semitic, but it is following a trend in the public, which is in essence an anti-Semitic trend. It is more than that. It is an attack on Polish liberalism, on the rule of law. They are now in a situation where the governing party, which has a majority, an absolute majority in parliament, nominates the judges. In other words, this is no longer independent.
No democracy, real democracy.
It is anti-democratic. Now, there are still strong elements of democracy in Poland, and there's a strong minority of Polish liberals, including a large group of wonderful Polish historians who have examined all this, are continuing to examine all this, and not closing their eyes to the real heroism of a large number of Poles, of course a small minority, who rescued Jews. Not only rescued Jews, but people who did not rescue Jews, but who helped them along the way. So we don't close our eyes to that. In fact, we recognize the largest number of righteous recognized by Yad Vashem are Poles. So we are not anti-Polish, but we are against the anti-democratic tendencies in the Polish government.
Revisionism. I wanted to ask you, you know anything about this Norman person, Sven Norman?
I don't know. When I was in Sweden recently, I asked some friends to find a Swedish professor in one of the universities who will have an MA student and put that MA student to write an MA thesis about Sven Norman, which is the obvious thing to do, because then as a MA student he will get access to Swedish archives, which are open. They are completely open, there's no problem. And of course it's a huge archive, and you have to work very hard to find, you know, a needle in the haystack. Yes.
Do you know if any professor have been thinking of that?
No.
Or that your friend?
No,
I mean.
no. I asked the representative of the Swedish Foreign Office to find out. But this is something that has to be done in Sweden. It can't be done in Jerusalem.
I know, but do you know any professor in Sweden?
Oh, there are plenty of people, wonderful scholars, historians, and so on, who teach, whether in Lund or in Uppsala or in Stockholm or some other place, who can take this on. It's, you know, it's very simple, really. You have a number of students, they come to you and they ask you, do you have any idea of something interesting I could do, you know, in my work? So if a young person of 20, 22, 23 years of age goes to a professor, says, I would like to write an MA thesis on something really interesting, so we can say, well, try to
Sven
do
Norman.
that. Yeah.
It's amazing.
But it's got to be done in Sweden. It can't be done outside, because you have to run from one place to the other in Sweden. You have to try to find out whether Norman had any relatives,
Siblings or
yeah, and further relatives, because then we might find out more about his background and so on. We don't really know much.
Are there any other Swedish people that are relevant that were either helped the Nazis or that you know of?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there was a Swedish Nazi party, yeah, and there were economic interests. the iron ore in Kiruna were a major source for German
Rails,
armaments.
yeah.
Yeah. So they were shipped. Yeah. Either through the Baltic or through Narvik. Most of them through Narvik because Luleå is blocked by ice in the winter. So
Narvik was occupied by the Nazis too. So.
well, that's all right because you sold the iron ore to the Nazis.
Yeah.
So that was fine.
Yeah, that was easier that way.
Yeah, it was, and the distance to Narvik is quite short.
Shorter than Luleå.
No, it's about the same, but it's short. And the railway was there, so no problem. And the people who were in charge of the company that was running Kiruna were of course interested in making money. So they sold the iron ore, and the Swedish government was afraid of a German invasion. Look, Sweden was surrounded by German occupied or German allied countries. Norway was occupied, Denmark was occupied, the Baltic coast was occupied, Finland was a
Soviet occupied or
No.
Nazi.
It was an ally of the Nazis.
Yeah.
So Sweden was alone there, and there was no way to break out. So the Swedes are very, very scared. The point is that we know today that the Nazis never thought of occupying Sweden because
There's not enough Jews there.
No, nothing to do with Jews, but simply because it was much more productive for them and sort of peaceful situation to get the iron ore without any problem, you know, from Sweden. They were not interested in Sweden as such. They were interested in the iron.
Yeah, of Kiruna. You know, the other day, just a couple of weeks ago, a very famous Swede passed away. His name is Ingvar Kamprad. Ingvar Kamprad is the
IKEA.
owner of IKEA.
IKEA. Yeah, well, he was a Nazi, pro-Nazi, yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
but when he died, everybody was like this and this. But the Communist Party in Sweden and the left was just like, oh, it's another Nazi who died.
Yeah.
But when he was talking about his history, his biography with a very famous Swedish reporter, he already talked about it and make sorries here and there and there and there and apologize and
Yeah,
all
well, he was, but you know, you have people like that, so it's not very surprising. You have that. I mean, you had Sven Norman was working for a company, Swedish company, which was under the control of the Wallenberg family. In actual fact, I do know that on one occasion he was part of a group of businessmen who met with Marcus Wallenberg in order to plan business ventures.
Sven Norman, you're talking
Sven
about.
Norman, yeah. But again, the fact that he met with Marcus Wallenberg doesn't mean anything. It just means that he was invited to a meeting, you know. Again, it's got to be found out, not, you know. I'm not trying to grab headlines.
No, we.
That's not my line.
But you know, a lot of people in Sweden knows that Wallenberg family did make a business with the Nazi
But
Germany.
everybody did business with the Nazis in Sweden. Everybody did, because there was no way really to do business with anyone else. All the sea lanes were controlled by the Germans. Yes, so there were Swedish neutral ships that could go through, but that was minor. Yeah, they did have contact with England. Yeah, and of course the Swedish government, which was largely social democratic at the time, did not like the situation but they thought that they had no way out. The only way was to try to keep neutral as much as possible. And that changed then as a result of, partly also because of the knowledge of what Germans were doing, not only to the Jews, but generally, and partly because the Germans got stuck in the Soviet Union in the second half of 1942. They were still advancing. There was still a possibility of the Germans conquering Stalingrad. But Stalingrad began, the German struggle for Stalingrad began in September 42. And it took almost half a year until they were defeated. So during that time, the Swedes slowly changed their policy. They accepted in November, and a bit later as well, a part of the very small Norwegian Jewish community was smuggled over the mountains by the Norwegian underground. And they had to be accepted by the Swedish government, otherwise they couldn't have done it. And then the Swedish government in October 43, but that is well known, declared openly that they would accept Jews from Denmark. They announced it publicly. They were no longer that much afraid of the Germans.
Because they know their Nazi Germany is getting defeating.
Is in trouble. So the Germans are not going to attack Sweden now. Yeah?
They don't want to have a new front. No.
Yeah. So, well, most of them went over the mountains.
In Dalarna, in Värmland, up there. Yeah. Does the Yad Vashem still chasing or looking for Nazis or in Sweden or in Europe?
Yad Vashem never did. That's not the job of Yad Vashem.
Yad Vashem's job is
to create a memory and to do historical research. The fate of the Nazis after the war is something very important, but Yad Vashem decades ago decided that was not what it was going to do. Somebody else will do it. They won't. That's where Simon Wiesenthal and other people came in.
Yes,
and there were people in Israel too who were doing it, and still are doing it. Yeah, I mean the Simon Wiesenthal Center has a representative here, a very important person, who still this day is trying to find out about, especially in Eastern Europe, collaborators with the Nazis.
In Eastern Europe?
In Eastern Europe, in Lithuania, Latvia,
yeah.
Hungary, and so on. But these are very old people now. It's no longer really something that, preoccupies you. It's much more important today to find out what these Nazis did rather than what happened to them after the war.
Okay.
All right.
I thank you very much, Professor Bauer. Thank you very much. See you next program.